Thank you for being here on the Friday afternoon before fall break. I know some of the students are holding on by your fingernails. Just a little longer. I just want to say, first of all, it's just been a stunning day. I think we couldn't have imagined a better series of talks from our panelists. I'm so grateful to you for incredibly, really everything. Every single presentation's been really first rate, and they've meshed together in beautiful ways. Thank you, it's really been a feast. But now it's a great pleasure and honor for me to have the opportunity to introduce to you Lorna Goodison, the Poet Laureate of Jamaica. And until recently, Lemuel A. Johnson, Professor of English and Afro-American Studies at the University of Michigan. She's been spending a good deal of time, of course, these days in Jamaica, but she comes to us today from her home in Half Moon Bay, British Columbia, where she lives with her husband, who, a distinguished scholar, spoke to us this afternoon, J. Edward Chamberlain. Goodison has received such major awards as the Commonwealth Poetry Prize, the Musgrave Gold Medal from the Institute of Jamaica, the Jamaican National Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander. I keep thinking you're going to have something. And just a couple of weeks ago, she spent a number of days in New Haven, Connecticut, as a recipient of the Wyndham Campbell Prize at Yale. Last year, she saw the publication of her massive collected poems, widely hailed as a major literary achievement, according to the Financial Times. For example, she referred to it as endlessly moving and rewarding, 4 decades of insight and honesty gathered in some 600 pages of rich, often fabulous verse. Her poetry's been anthologized in many places, many strong literary collections, and she's also an acclaimed memoirist and short story writer. Her outstanding achievements meant that she's in really high demand, and so we're especially lucky to have her. She goes on and does things like she's a festival laureate at the Durham Book Festival, the honorary festival patron, the Bristol Festival, keynote speaker, Irish Caribbean Connections Conference in New York, many other appearances in North America, the British Isles, Caribbean, South Africa, and elsewhere, so we're lucky to have her with us today. Rich and radiant in imagery, lush and incantatory in music, Goodison's poems journey into the recesses of her personal, familial, and historical past. They unflinchingly name and mourn the wounds of Caribbean history, enslavement, rape, torture, the breakup of families, yet also celebrate the region's multiple peoples, cultures, religions, and languages. Her poetry's humane capaciousness enables her verse to traverse various historical and racial divides, recognizing the heroism of a leader of the anti-colonial resistance, and yet also, maybe unexpectedly, the daring of a colonial explorer, the torment of an enslaved African Caribbean girl, and yet also the suffering of her patriarchally abused English tormentor. Open to the sensuous textures and rhetorical strategies of various forms of expression, her poetry also crosses generic lines. In its dialogue with other arts and discourses, it draws on the vividness of painting, and we've been seeing intersections between poetry and the visual arts a couple of times today. And she is indeed herself an accomplished painter. Also drawing on the cadences and sonorities of song, the incantations of prayer, the legal quest for justice, yet shows itself as poetry to have certain freedoms and capacities that in some ways exceed those of any of these other genres. Goodison writes poetry of imaginative opulence while keeping the verbal fabric taut, tightly woven. She switches deftly, almost imperceptibly among linguistic registers and responds intimately to worlds seen and unseen. Again, it's an honor to introduce a writer of such deep spiritual reserves, such boundless generosity. Please join me in warmly welcoming Lorna Goodison.
My great-grandmother was a Guinea woman. Wide eyes turning the corners of her face, could see behind her. Her cheeks dusted with a fine rash of jet bead warts that itched when the rain set up. My great-grandmother's waistline was the span of a headman's hand. She was slender and tall like a cane stalk, with a Guinea woman's antelope quick walk. And when she paused, her gaze would look to see her profile fine, like some obverse impression on a Guinea coin from royal memory. Now it seems her fate was anchored in that unfathomable sea, because great-grandmother caught the eye of a sailor whose ship sailed without him from Lucy Harbor. Great-grandmother's royal scent of cinnamon and scallions drew the sailor up the Straits of Africa, and the evidence is my blue-eyed grandmother, the first mulatto, taken into Backer's household and covered with his name. And they forbade great-grandmother's Guinea woman presence. They washed away her scent of cinnamon and scallions. They controlled her as antelope walk, and they called her uprisings rebellions. But great-grandmother, I see your features. They are blood-dark appearing in the children of each new breeding, and the high yellow-brown is darkening down. Listen, children, it's your great-grandmother's turn. Good afternoon, I'm so happy I'm honored to be here. I should have stopped saying I'm so, but I am so. Thank you, Jahan. Thank you, Carolyn and family. Thank you, everybody here. And what a brilliant set of people we heard all through the day. To make various sorts of black, according to the Craftsman's Handbook, Chapter 37, Il Libro dell'Arte by Cennino d'Andrea Cennini, who tells us there are several kinds of black colors. First, there is a black derived from soft black stone. It is a fat color, not hard at heart, a stone unction. Then there is a black that is obtained from vine twigs. Twigs that chose to abide on the true vine, offering up their bodies at the last to be burned. Then quenched and worked up, they can live again as twig of the vine black. Not a fat, more of a lean color, favored alike by vine dressers and artists. There is also the black that is scraped from burnt shells, markers of Atlantic's graves, black of scorched earth, of tart stones of peach, twisted trees that bore strange fruit. And then there's a black that is the source of light from a lamp full of oil, such as any thoughtful guest waiting for bride and groom who cometh will have. A lamp you light and place underneath, not a bushel, but a good, clean, everyday dish that is fit for baking. Now bring the little flame of the lamp up to the undersurface of the earthenware dish. See a distance of about 2 or 3 fingers away, and the smoke that emits from that small flame will struggle up to strike at clay. Strike till it crowds and collects in a mess or mass. No, wait. Wait a while, please. Before you sweep this color, no sable velvet soot, off onto any old paper, or consign it to shadows, outlines, and backgrounds. Observe, it does not need to be worked up nor ground. It is just perfect as it is. Refill the lamp, Cennini says, as many times as the flame burns low, refill it. I shall light a candle of understanding in thine heart, it shall not be put out. I shall light, for its debts to pay and offenses to mend. Lay to rest the wounded past, the foes disguised as friends. I shall light a candle of understanding. Cease the training of impossible hedges round this life, For as fast as you sow them, serendipity thickets will appear and outgrow them. I shall light a candle of understanding in thine heart. All things in their place then in this many-chambered heart. For each thing a place, and for love a place apart. I shall light a candle of understanding in thine heart, which shall not be put out. And by the hand that lit the candle, by the never-to-be extinguished flame, by the candle wax which wind-worried drips into candle wings, luminous and rare, by the illumination of that candle, exit death and fear and doubt. Hear love and possibility within a lit heart, shining out. I had things I was going to read, but something else is happening, so I'm just going to go with it. This is a poem called The Road of the Dread. That the road not paved like any other blackface road. It don't have no definite color. And fenced two sides with live barbed wire. And don't look for the milepost to measure your walking, and take no stone as dead or familiar. But sometimes you pass a thing that you know as, call it stone again. Or it's a snake, ready to squeeze you, kill you. Or it's a dead man taking possession, tease you. And then the place that I feel is resting place, because time before they welcome like rain, body again, bad dog, bad face, turn for drive you underground where you have no light to walk. And many of me who say them understand is only from their mouth and tongue. One good thing though, that same treatment will make you walk untold distance. For to continue, you have to walk far away from the wicked. On the same road, your sister, sometimes you drink your salt sweat for water. For you sure say at least that not poison. And bread, picture it, and you chew it accordingly. And sometimes you're surprised to know that full of belly. And some days have no definite color. No beginning or ending, it just named day or night. That's how you feel to call it. And why I tread it, brother, well, make I tell you about the day then when the Father sent some little bird that swallow flute for thrill me. And when he instruct the sun to smile upon me first. The sky calm like a sea when it sleep, and a breeze like a laugh follow me. Or the one final stream that pure like a baby mine, and the water just eases down your throat and quiet it inside. Better still when you meet another traveler who have flower and you have water, and a one just make bread together. Them time there, the road just runs straight and sure like a young horse that cannot tire. And you catch a glimpse of the end through the water in your eye, and I will not tell you what I spy, but it's for that alone that I tread this road. The wandering Jew and the Arab merchant on the island of allspice. Jamaica used to produce most of the world's allspice, and Jamaicans didn't know there was any big difference between Jews and Arabs when I was growing up. Along the road we passed the wandering Jew in his dark suit, his cart piled high with dry goods. Further along we sighted the Arab merchant, his wares rising from his back in a camel hump. Attar of roses, good for your noses, come to you from me and Moses. Buy your perfumes pressed from those fragrant rose blossoms of Lebanon. All the way along the Damascus road the Jew has come to sell his things to the freed Africans. The Arab came following the long spice route to this island of allspice. Shalom and salam becomes salo on the tongues of the Africans. They were known those days to find themselves, the Arab and the Jew, in the same free village on the same day, peddling their similar wares. And in the village square they would sit at noon under broad shades of old lignum vitae trees and break bread together on bread challah, share aish or Syrian bread. Aish, ancient name for both bread and humanity. They'd sit, eat, and remark how some hard-pay Africans do not like to part with silver, and how they both dread a walk through cockpit country. And the Arab gave the Jew a chip from the Kaaba to protect him in the valley of the shadow. And the Jew gave the Arab an amulet shaped like Moses' tablet. And to the Africans they both sell Bibles. Then all blessed Father Abraham, before taking to the hill and gully roads, across this island of allspice. It's a poem called Ode to the Watchman. As we exit from the old city before day, we sight the night watchman at his post. Evidence of his vigilance against nocturnal furies red in his eyeballs. He did not bow though. No, not him. It is right to thank him. All praise to you, O beneficent watchman, for keeping guard over us while we slept. Blessed be your eyelids, which did not blink even once in solidarity with those lowered shutters, window blinds, and jalousies. You remained awake, ever alert, armed, with only your nightstick, rod, and staff, your aged cross-mongrel dog rampant at your side, even as the smoke pennant blown from your rough-cut, filterless hand-rolled cigarettes flew out full staff. For pushing against that grease-stained tarpaulin of despair and not allowing it to befoul us during our needed night rest. For keeping at bay restless rolling calves, trampling down from those sleep hills, busted old rusty chains rattling to shake the firm resolve of our small hearts. Thanks, Watchy, for keeping them from breaking and entering our little children's dreams. And now, kind watchman, you just go home to rest. You who did not seize and beat the beloved as she roamed the streets composing the Song of Solomon. Go home, good watchman. The last hot rush of caffeine pins that pricked your blood awake has been rained from your thermos flask. Your bread back of night lunch cast upon the keep-wake fire in your belly. Cease that anti-lullaby you keen to maintain wake. The sun is here to take your place. Probably should pick up this piece of paper on which I've written out. Thank you. I come from Jamaica, as you may have heard. And Jamaica has a national hero called Nanny of the Maroons, who makes Gal Gadot look like a gal. I mean, you know Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman? Nanny was original Wonder Woman. So I read this to some of my friends who were talking to me earlier about women and empowerment. Nanny, my womb was sealed with the molten wax of killer bees, for nothing should enter, nothing should leave. The state of perpetual siege, the condition of the warrior. And from then my whole body would quicken at the birth of every one of my people's children. I was schooled in the green-giving ways of roots and vines, made accomplice to the healing acts of cheney root, fever grass, and vervine. My breast flattened, settled, unmoving against my chest. My movements ran equal to the rhythms of the forest. I could sense and sift the footfall of men from the animals and smell danger, death's odor in the wind's shift. And when my eyes rendered light from the dark, my battle song opened into a solitaire's moan. I became most knowing and forever alone. And when my training was over, they circled my waist with pumpkin seeds and dried okra in a traveler's jigida, and sold me to the traders, all my weapons within me. I was sent. Tell that to history. And when your sorrow obscures the skies, and this is true, other women like me will rise. Okay, to somebody, was it so? One of you asked the question earlier about how would the poetry of the 60s have any sort of relevance, and this is a poem for Rosa Parks. And I'm not going to explain a lot about it, except to say, I wrote this poem because I was looking at a photograph of Rosa Parks. Did you ever look at a photograph of her? She just looked like she would never raise her voice, or she looked at my Aunt Rose, like a completely harmless person. So you could take some inspiration from that. You know, she just looked like she wouldn't be a badass, but she was. And how was this soft-voiced woman to know that this no, in answer to the command to rise, would signal the beginning of the time of walking? Soft the word, like the closing of some awful book, a too long story with no pauses for reason, but yes, an ending, and the signal to begin the walking. But the people had walked before, in yoked formations down to Calabar, into the belly of close-ribbed whales, sealed for seasons and unloaded to walk again, alongside cane stalks tall as men. No, walking was not new to them. Saw a woman tie rags to her feet, running red, burnishing the pavements. A man with no 40 acres, just a mule, riding towards Jerusalem. And the children, small somnambulists, moving in the before-day morning, and that woman who never raised her voice, never lowered her eyes, and we just kept walking towards sunrise. I trained as a painter, you know, I do all the covers of my books. That's the only art I do now. But I write about art a lot. And two things I just like to say very quickly. We in Jamaica, you know, certainly in any kind of post-colonial society, you have to struggle against things that people tell you. That there was no art before people were trained in Europe, came and gave us art. One thing that all enslaved people had was a board, calabash, we call it. And very often those were very elaborately carved. So we are saying that is art. And the second one is that I always say that no matter what happens to you as a human being, you can make some gesture that says I'm a human being. And very often when enslaved women had their babies sold away from them, they would make these carvings representing the babies, and they would hang them from a rope around their necks, and then symbolically feed them before they ate. So these two poems, Passing the Grace Vessels of Calabash, Passing the Grace Vessels of Calabash, or four parents carved on, lest they forget. Maps, totems, symbols, and secret names, creating art when some would claim we existed in beast state. Every Negro in slavery days had their own hand-engraved calabash. So we drink water from grace vessels, their lips kissing lines of maps, leading back to Africa, villages where relatives waited for years before they destroyed the cooking pots of the ones who crossed. So who was the mother of Jamaican art? She was the first nameless woman who created images of her children sold away from her. She suspended those wood babies from a rope around her neck, and before she ate, she fed them. Touched bits of pounded yam and plantains to seal lips, always urged them to sip water. She carved them of heartwood. Teeth and nails were her first tools. Later she wielded a blunt blade. Her spit cleaned face and limbs, and the pitch oil of her skin burnished. When the woodworms bored into their bellies, she warmed castor oil and they purged. And she learned her art by breaking hard rock stones, and she did not sign her work. One of the things I try to do with enormous help from Prince Jahan, is to write about, well, people who have no voice. And one of the poems, one of the first poems I ever spoke with, it's called Annie Pengeli. I'm going to read it for Jahan. And for all the great work he does for all of us. Thank you so much. And thanks to Peter for all the work he did for getting us out here. Okay, very, very quickly, this is a poem. It's one of my mother's stories. It came from the part of the country my mother is from. But I think I'll just read the poem. It's written, I told one of my friends earlier that the voice in the poem is the voice of an advocate. I like, one of the names for a poet I like is a maker. The Scots call their poets makers. And I like to think that when you're making a poem, you're making something useful that you can, okay, that a poem has a really function in the world. So the voice of the poet here is the voice of an advocate. And she's come to speak on behalf of this little girl whose name was Annie Pengele, who was owned by this woman. And anyway, I'll just read it. I come to represent the case of one Annie Pengele, maidservant, late of the St. Fleming estate, situated in the westerly parish of Hanover. Hanover, where that massive mountain range assumes the shape of a dolphin's head, rearing up in the blue expanse overhead, restless white clouds rounded foaming. Those at sea would look up and behold, mirrored, a seascape in the sky. It is this need to recreate, to run against things that cause all this confusion. The same need that made men leave one side of the world to journey in long-hauled ships to drove millions of souls to a world that they call the new one, in competition with the original act, the creation of the old one. So now you're telling me to proceed and proceed swiftly, and why have I come here representing Annie? Well, this is the first thing she asked me to say, that Annie is not even her real name. A name is the first thing we own in this world. We lay claim to a group of sounds which rise up and down and mark our space in the air around us. We become owners of a harmony of vowels and consonants, singing a specific meaning. Her real was given to her at the pastoral ceremony of her outdooring. Its outer meaning was, she who is precious to us. It had too a hidden part, a kept secret, a meaning known only to those within the circle of our family. For sale with a man, one small girl, one small African girl, answered now to the name of Annie. Oh, Mrs. my dear, when you write Lady Nugent, to tell her of your splendid birthday, of the ivory moire gown you wore, that you sent Claire to London for, you can tell her how you had built for you a pair of soft, simple leather riding boots, fashioned from your own last by Georgia Brand Wilson, late of Aberdeen, now shoemaker and saddler of Lucy Hanover, late occupation broke sailor. One pair of tortoiseshell combs, one scrolled silverback mirror, one dinner party where they killed one whole cow, with oaken casks of Madeira wine to wash it down, and don't forget one small African girl, answer now to the name of Annie. With all that birthday show of affection, Master never sleep with Mrs. But I am not here to talk about that. That is Backra's business. I am really just here representing Annie Pengele. For Mrs. began to make Annie sleep across her feet come December, when northers began to blow. Northers being the chill wheeling tail end of the winter breezes, dropping off their cold what left in Jamaica to confuse the transplanted planter, causing them to remember words like hoarfrost and moors from a frozen vocabulary they no longer had use for. When this fall's winter breeze would careen across cane fields, Mrs. would make Annie lie draped, heaped across her feet, a human blanket, nothing covering her as she gave her warmth to Mrs. So I've come to say that history owes Annie the brightest woolen blanket. She's owed to at least 12 years of sleep, stretched out, free to assume the stages of sleep, flat on her back, or profile like the characters in an Egyptian frieze. Most nights though, Mrs. don't sleep, and as Annie was subject to Mrs.'s will, Annie was not to sleep as long as Mrs. kept her open-eyed vigil. Sometimes she'd sit up, sipping wine from a cut glass goblet, just talking. Sometimes Mrs. would dance and sing like she was on a stage, sad cantatrice solo in a stage performing. At the end of her performance, she would demand that Annie clap and shout, encore. Encouraged by this, she would sing on, dance on, or half-praised tort song of rejection. Sometimes Annie nod off, Mrs. juke her with a pearl-tip pin. Sometimes Annie tumble off the chair, fell by sleep, Mrs. slap her awake again. Then in order to keep her alert, awake, she devised the paper torture. One pile of newspapers and a sharp pair of scissors later, Annie learned about the cruel make-work task of this cut-up to throw away of old newspaper. For if Mrs. could not sleep, and girl, you don't sleep that night. And poor Mrs., enslaved by love, fighting her servitude with spite. So I say history owes Annie thousands of nights of sleep upon a feather bed, soft feathers from the breast of a free soaring bird, one bright blanket, and her name returned, she who is precious to us. Annie Pengeleo, I say, history owe you. What's my time? I think I'm...
You're good.
Oh. Anybody, you all love Otis Redding? Yeah. This is a poem for Otis Redding, and I just want to say, there's such an enormous debt which I owe to my African American brothers and sisters. I owe to all. First of all, let me just say that I think the United States of America is a great country. The fact that you produce so much brilliance and wonderfulness, and at sometimes we should never forget that. All the beauty and the truth and the light and the gorgeousness that has come out of this society. Other things too, but we talk about. And one of the things you do is that it's, you know, you can sing, singing, yeah. And I love, anyway, this is a poem for, let me get myself together here, Otis Redding. A poem for Otis Redding, it's called Otis Ode. Okay, let me just tell you a little bit. When I was going to parties, which I don't do anymore, you're a teenager, like the guys used to like when they played Otis, because the girls would get all, oh. And then, you know, they would get to dance with you and hold you close and, you know. So, you know, Otis was a kind of beggar, and he begged and pleaded on behalf of the guys. He said, guys are, you know what I'm saying? The strong young men called on Otis to beg for them, plead for them out there on the dangerous dance floor, implore Otis to ask a girl permission to press up close, rent a tile, pretending this was their wedding dance. The boys depended solely on Otis to convince pretty girls, born with knowledge that beauty controlled, the quick sap rising in trembling, awkward striplings out on a limb, as voices broke on a take a chance, here to dance. Youth man breathing hard, waits for the verdict one, no thanks, or I'm too tired. But with advocacy of Otis, in hope she'd say yes, and so allow clammy handhold privilege. Grateful boy walks girl on the dance floor, palm slides the smaller back, tries to lead slow dance. Girl shrugs eyes tight and projects her ripe self to rub up close against honky hard body of handsome Otis Redding. Nomenclature come straight up from the Georgia clay. O Redding, son of Macon, Georgia, what's in the water? What's in the water in Georgia to make musicians like Little Richard, James Brown, and Mary Lou Williams? And this day I've come to look for Big Otis, to see his bronze self statue there down by the Ocmulgee River. I follow the sound of into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame, where the display tells how he did well for himself, was gifted, made money, owned the book Big O. Oh, I like that photograph of you seated astride your horse. You wrote your own songs, one on the back of a bill, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Otis wrote that. Arita owned it. He said all the S-U-C-C-E-S-S she had with it was fine with him. He was striving. It was not always so. Here we see evidence of the sing slow, bite your tongue years. He carried baggage of hefted band equipment for, drove a station wagon taking others to the sound studios, till one day he begged for extra session time, left over by some small-scale singer, and O stepped up to the mic, and as fans today would say, kill. It is recorded that in Respect View, when he met Otis in Kingston in 1979, Bob Marley stood and chanted, "These arms of mine." Old school. I was in the crowd, hailing you then, hail you now. Otis Redding, advocate of all love's beggars. I'm going to be done now. I'm going to be done. Thank you so much. Thank you. Love to see old friends here. I thank you all. Thank you so much. I just close with an elegy for my mother. That is an elegy for a lot of people now. Yeah. It's called After the Green Gown and My Mother Gone Down. August. Her large heart slows down and then stops. Fall now and trees flame, catch a fire and riot. Last leaves in scarlet and gold fever burning. Remember when you heard Bob Marley hymn Redemption song, and from his tone and timbre you sensed him traveling. He had sent the band home and was just keeping himself company, cooling star. Sad rude boy fretting on a cowboy box guitar, in a studio with stray echo and wailing sound, lost singing scatting through the door of no return. When the green goes, beloved, the secret is open, the breath falls still and the life covenant is broken. Dress my mother's cold body in a deep green gown, catch a fire and let fall and flame time come, after the green gown of my mother gone down. We laid her down full of days, chant griot from the book of life, and summon her kin from the long-lived line of David and Margaret. Come Cleardine, Alberta, Flavius, Edmund, Howard, and Rose, come and walk their Doris home. And the blue mountains will open to her to seal her corporeal self in. From the ancient vault that is their lapis lazuli heart, the headwaters of all our rivers spring. Headwaters wash away the embalmer's myrrh resin, the dredging of white powder caking her cold limbs. Return her right body clean to follow the earth. For her eyes to become brown agate stones, from her forehead may they dawn bright mornings. May her white hair contribute to the massing of clouds, and cause the blood settled in her palms to sink into fish-filled lagoons. Earth, she was a mother like you, who birthed and nursed her children, with cherubims and angels. See her name written down in the index of the faithful, in the mother of pearl book of saints. Mama, Aunt Ann says that you saw Aunt Rose come out of an orchard, red with ripe fruit, and called out laughing to you, and that you scaled the wall like two young girls, scampered barefoot among the lush fruit groves. My mother's sea shanty. I dream I'm washing my mother's body in the night sea, and that you sing slow, and that she still breathes. I see my sweet mother, a plump mermaid in my dreams, and I wash her white hair with ambergris and foaming seaweed. I watch my mother underwater, gather the loose pearls she finds, scrub them free from nacre, and string them on a lost fishing line. I hear my dark mother speaking sea speak with pilot fish, showing them how to direct barks that bear away our grief and anguish. I pray my mother breaks free from her fish pots and marine chores, of her residence beneath the sea, and that she rides a wild, white horse. Thank you.
So, thank you for that moving, beautiful reading. As we all try to recover from that experience, Lorna Goodison has agreed to answer a few questions before we adjourn for our reception to celebrate this wonderful day. And Lorna Goodison and all of our other wonderful speakers. Maybe I should give the floor again to, is there a student here? I know a number of you have been writing about and reading Lorna Goodison who would venture a question by any chance to get us started. Lorna Goodison. I did warn you. Yes, great.
I've got one. You said that Annie Peggley was an advocate. Do you think she is an advocate for something, or you are an advocate for her? How would you word that?
I'm not very good at thinking through what I do. Usually I do it. Usually I do it, and that's why I'm married Ted, because he's very good at it. You know, really, seriously though, I think there also, you know, there's a big move, you know, like in the Caribbean, there's a move on to talk about reparations, you know, for plantation slavery. And I'm of the opinion that it should be approached from many angles. And one of them, surely there should be a storytelling project or something for people. And maybe this is my hope that that poem will start something going, you know. Maybe I just made that up just a while ago, I don't know. No, but really, stories have a way, and Ted has written up beautifully about this stuff, of making a point much more than any kind of political, you know, document something. And I've not answered the question, but that's the best I can do.
Thank you.
Another question, anyone? Yes.
I was just wondering about Nanny. I asked you a little bit before, but on kind of just like the fluidity of her gender and the language that you use, you know, what are you kind of imagining her to be?
Well, I think I've done a lot of different kinds of jobs in order to do my work. That's how I put it. And I'm very good. Like when I went to art school in New York for a while, and I was a cashier at the Fifth Avenue Cinema. And it meant that I saw a lot of great movies. I love Akira Kurosawa's work. But I only saw the second half because it was a cashier. And then I had to go back the next day and see the first half. So I saw movies, you know. So what am I saying to you? What were you asking me again?
The fluidity of
So one of the jobs I did, you know, I used to do, I've done all kinds of writing. I've written speeches, I've written propaganda for the book, you know, all kinds of things. But I I was on a project when we were making an international hearing. And I did a lot of field work. I went to the Maroon communities in Jamaica. And I spoke to a lot of people, a lot of Maroons, and nobody ever said she had children. It is pretty much agreed that she was an extraordinary warrior and military strategist, and she had powers as a healer. But nobody ever said she had children. And I don't know, it just, I was just thinking about her a lot, and the other thing is, for many years, and I meant to read a poem called Remember Us in Motherland, because I think a lot of other people in African diaspora are always wanting people in Africa to say something to us, like, how do you feel about us, you know, like, you think about, I ask every time I have like an African student in my class, I said, so do you guys talk about us, and you talk about slavery? And of course my teacher said, oh, they said that happened a long time ago. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that you think about us and you miss us and, you know, wish, anyway. So if I put all of those together, that is also my kind of wish as a poet. That I had this kind of feeling and a prayer almost, that some figures like Nanny were deliberately trained, because her level of expertise as a warrior was extraordinary. Everybody, her brother gave up and she didn't. She fought the British until they had to make peace with her. So I'm just thinking that maybe she was trained and deliberately sold into slavery in order to fight this resistance war, which would mean that there will be people in Africa thinking about us, you know. So that, yeah, and all those things are always going on. So all of them came together in that war. But more than that, like I honestly believe that she came out of extraordinary circumstances, and there'll be more people like that. Is that a good answer?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for coming. It was incredible. I just wanted to say that like I often struggle a lot understanding poetry, and one of the I'm like questioning a lot of the time like how I'm supposed to interact with the poetry that I'm hearing or reading. And one of the things that like I felt like when I was listening to you is that like when you're talking about that poem like the Jew and the Arab, right? So I'm Jewish, right? And I hear that and immediately like kind of like frames my interaction with the poem, right? And I'm wondering are you trying to create these I guess like frames of interaction, like you want people to view it a certain way, or do you just kind of like when you're making your poetry, like however I interact with it is fine, it doesn't matter, or are you like deliberately trying to create these like kind of routes that people can really like interact with?
I'm glad when people, yeah, I guess I am. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping that people could see that there's a part of the world where these, that people didn't, honestly, maybe it's ignorance, that we never saw that, because very often Jews and Arabs in the Caribbean intermarried, and then nobody made any distinction between them. We call everybody from that part of the world Syrians, which is, honestly, you could say they're stupid Jamaicans, but we never thought they were, and so we were always kind of surprised to hear about these really deep divisions, So I don't know, sometimes something like that might help, but that there's a part of the world where this does not obtain. It's true, and it's also just true. A lot of my poems are driven by history. The muse of history is very, what is it? Is the muse of poetry, memory, history of memory. So a lot of my poems are, the sort of kernel of them is some historical fact or some story from history, which I then build on. So is that okay?
One of the things that was so striking in your beautiful reading was just, you start off with various ways of making the color black, and you talk about the little amulets or sculptures that people made. So, and there are many other poems dealing with kind of the visual arts, and obviously that's a really important area in your work. And then there are also all these references to song, and in many of your poems, you sort of draw on the resources of song. And I just wonder, when you think about poetry in relation to these other art forms, what can a poem do better than you can do as an artist, say, or than you can do as a singer, and vice versa? Are there, how do you think about the relationship between poetry and other art?
Well, I always go back, I think I'll go back to it. My father died when I was 15 years old. And I don't come from a society where you do grief counseling or anything. No, we don't. So it was, you were just kind of left to work it out on your own. And I had no idea what to do, but I just found, I went to live with my sister. Anyway, I read a lot of poetry. That's when I turned to poetry. And maybe it was just time, but I found after a while that I read myself through the experience of poetry. So just for that reason alone, I credit poetry with taking me. And to this day, and maybe this answers something in your question too. I believe that good poetry has some medicine in it. For me, a good poem has a little medicine, or a lot of medicine in it. Because I certainly benefited from the medicinal properties of, I love I love George Herbert. I tried, and I also, and I'm a big, like you, I'm a big John Keats fan. And I was going to say something, but earlier, that I think one of the reasons that Keats, he knew such a loss and such bereavement. And it's true. There's just one, when I read something, I say, that's not true. That dude, you never write anything is ever written way down on that. It's true. Not that it actually happened, but it's coming from a place that is just, you can hold it and it won't move. You know what I'm saying? So I try to answer your question. Poetry is, I couldn't live without it. It's just a thing that has helped me. There are times I couldn't pray, but I certainly could find some connection with the divine truth. There were times when I thought I was lost, and then I found something in poetry that connected directly with my humanity and helped me to bring me back in. So I don't know, maybe this property exists in other art form, but for me, that is what poetry does.
Here we take.
I just have to say, and it's not a question, it's just a comment. I was sitting here and I was thinking, there was a point in your reading that I just had this feeling flow over me that I was listening to a prayer. And I just want to thank you for that. That was just so beautiful. Thank you so much.
What a terrific day. Thank you all for making